So today we've come down to Queenswoods in Highgate, to a very special place, which is where I actually first met Jean Williams many years ago. And I come down today with Caroline Wise, a long-time friend of Jean's. Could you tell us a little bit about what Jean meant to you and how you met?
Well, I met Jean at an event at her house which became very significant for me throughout the rest of my life. It was a Gnostic Mass, Aleister Crowley's Gnostic Mass, and I've been to many ceremonies and rituals before with various different pagan groups and occult groups, but this was sublime. It was just beautiful. It was on another level, and that of course was all down to the expertise and the presence of Jean and her partner Zach. And she taught me that a ritual was really just a lot of different layers that had to be harmonious, of music, of incense, of colour, of sound, and of course the words. And it was a really transcendent ritual. It took me into a altered state of consciousness, which I think rituals should do. But what was especially significant for me was at that event I met two women who were to become my very close friends. One was a sublime priestess of Sekhmet, who to this day is a very dear friend and has taught me so much, and really was my role model in how to be a priestess. And the other one is my friend Ruth, who lived with Jean and Zach, and who has become a great friend. So in terms of meeting two lifelong friends who were very significant to my life, that was a very important meeting with Jean. But to see how ritual should be done by Jean and her partner Zach and her team was also very significant to me.
Do you think that's inspired the way that you've gone on to do rituals? Because you yourself have conducted many public rituals. I myself have learned a lot from the way that you've done rituals. Do you think that this was an inspiration at the beginning days?
It was. The Gnostic Mass is a beautiful ritual anyway, but done by this team, it was superb. And it's always taught me to remember that in ceremony and ritual, whether it's public or private, there must be grace and there must be harmony, and again there must be all those elements that she taught me, the earth being maybe the colour in the temple, how it's set up, so that everything becomes a symphony with the air of the incense and the fire of the candles and the light, the music of the water flowing. She had many interests. She had a very positive interest in psychology and in nature and in conservation of the earth. She was a quiet person. She went about doing her good stuff without a lot of razzmatazz, and I think that's something a lot of people could learn from her.
Yeah, no need for look at me, look at me, look at what I'm doing. Just quietly getting on with it, because it's really transpiring that I knew she'd been a major contribution to the pagan community, but I'm surprised to know now exactly how wide that influence was, how widespread, what an innovator she actually was.
And I should imagine that there's many other things that she was doing. For instance, the Rainbow Bridge group, which conducted the most fabulous rituals, which the group all wrote. Each member would write a different ceremony, and we were very honoured through my husband's company Starfire to publish the book The Play Goes On by Jean Williams and Zachary Cox last year, with the most fantastic visual contribution from Ruth Bayer, Jean's longtime friend, and who's carrying on Jean's work. The play goes on, the rituals of the Rainbow Bridge. Now, these rituals, many of them, were based on the ancient Greek and the ancient Egyptian traditions, for example.
Jean was a very caring, very considerate person who seemed to understand people better than they understood themselves a lot of the time, I think. She was always there being supportive, had everybody else's best interests at heart, and really worked hard at making sure that she was supporting everybody. She was also an amazing pillar of strength. She was a small person, but goodness me, in terms of her personality and stature, she was a giant.
Well, I met Jean and Zach in the 80s, in the mid-80s, and I was lucky enough, I was looking for a room or a place to live because I had to move out. And I was lucky enough there was a room free, and Jean asked me if I wanted to move in. And that was in the late 80s, and I'm still there. And we shared an incredible time with Jean, and I shared an incredible time with Jean and Zach. In the mundane world, and of course in the magical world as well. It was obviously a karmic meeting, definitely, absolutely, definitely. We became a kind of patchwork family. You know, we're very, very, very close. We shared very much the mundane world as much as the magical world, and we just got to know each other so brilliantly. And I think Jean and Zach always sort of also really enjoyed my other friends or my partner, Dave, who was very much welcome in this household. And you know, I just remember lots of wonderful dinners we used to have, and we used to, you know, sometimes we sang Zach's limericks. You know, I'm not going to sing because I can't, but but it was absolutely amazing, and we sort of did so many things together, and we had such an amazing time, and absolutely lovely. Yes, I'm very blessed.
I've known Jean Williams for almost 30 years. I first met her at a Pagan Pathfinder's introductory evening, and came along expecting to find this rather weird witchy figure, and instead was met at the door by a lady who looked very much like the vicar's wife, and with a very plummy accent, and hustled me into a room with a bunch of other people sitting around a big oak table, and my impression of Jean was completely different to what I'd imagined her to be. She was very friendly, vivacious, very, very homely, and as I learnt later, incredibly magical.
Well, I think Jean was pagan through and through. I mean, all her interests and all her way of living was so much to do with the goddess and nature. I mean, she was also sort of supporting charities like Friends of the Earth. She had green fingers, as you can see, in this beautiful garden, and I think she just had this amazing, calm charisma, and she was just absolutely wonderful. I mean, I really think she was, you know, the goddess spoke through her.
I think one of the biggest changes I found from PP is that it helped me find a peace and tranquility within myself and a strength within myself that I wasn't able to easily access before that time. And it also put me on a magical and Wiccan path, which has had major changes in my whole life. Mostly good. I'm still very much involved in Wicca, and hope to continue to do that. So yes, that has been one major change, but I don't think that Jean was about promoting Wicca. I think PP was about giving people tools for changing their own life, and enabling people to find ways of changing their consciousness, accessing parts of them that they weren't using before, and also finding, for a lot of people, a way of obtaining peace and tranquility within themselves, which most of us can't do on our normal day-to-day lives, which tend to be so pressurized and so time-consuming, that actually having a release, able to do some of the exercises that we learned at PP, was a really great way for most people in coming to terms with their the pressures and strains of their mundane lives. And whether they went on to go into Wicca, or whether they just used this themselves, was a matter of personal choice.
So I first met Jean Williams at the Pagan Federation Open Rituals, and even by that time she was already a tiny little old lady, but she had such presence and such kind of poise and gentle grace, and she really brought me in, and she made sure to talk to me. I was 18 at the time, and she asked me, you know, what I was doing, what I was interested in, all of those things, and she was one of the most kind and caring people that I knew. She had this mind that was incredibly bright and incisive, and if you ever went to any of her lectures, she knew so much about her own subject, psychology, but then also about how to mix that in with all of her experience in magic and ritual. Much later, I was lucky enough to be initiated into her downline in Wicca, and then came to know her as a Wiccan high priestess, which wasn't something that a lot of people knew her as, but in that capacity she was incredibly wise, and she added so much to our tradition, and I'll always appreciate that, and her memory stays with us, and I think will be honoured for many Samhains to come.
I've known her for 30 years. Everybody on the Pagan Community has known her for about 30 years. And I remember something that Vivian Crowley once says. She says, in the Pagan Community, the only measure that they make of you is your service to the community. And I don't think anyone in the community served the community more loyally than Jean, sort of more steadily than Jean.
I think that my fondest memory is of perhaps the council meetings, which I attended quite regularly, although I lived in the Netherlands. I still live in the Netherlands. But I was always pleased when Jean was actually at the council meetings, because you knew that if things got a little bit het up, or you know, when people get a little bit angry and emotional, she had this wonderful way of calming everything down and sort of bringing it back to order. And I always would kind of look at Jean and sort of think, where is she? Or so I do remember her as being an excellent facilitator, and she really had this wonderful gift of encouraging people to go perhaps a little bit out of their comfort zone, but she was also a very good person to have in meetings to just get everything back to kind of normal, so that we could actually have a dialogue instead of end up in a very, very uncompromising, argumentative atmosphere. So that's how I remember Jean. And she had this beautiful, beautiful voice, a very calming voice, so that's how I often remember her. I can still hear her speaking, yeah.
I think she effectively ran the Pagan Federation for decades, and the thing I liked most about Jean was her style. She was a small woman, she was very modest, very humble. She just did things behind the scenes. She was just always there. She was always there with a smile. Even in her later years, she was nimble, she was sprightly, and she was always still smiling and always still turning up to events. I think that's an important thing. She turned up to things.
I can't really put a time on when I first saw her. She always was around in PF Open rituals, and but the first real proper memory was when I was part of a play, which was basically the journey of Persephone through the year, and Jean played the crone, and I was Demeter, and so it was a great honor to come to her house and do rehearsals with her and perform the show in, I think it was probably 2010. It was in Pan's Picnic, I think. That's the first memory. And the other one, when I was once performing as a singer, and she really, really liked it. And so every time she heard me, saw me, and when there was a chance for me to sing, she said, "Oh, will you sing today?" So she really encouraged me to sing, and so that was like one of the important things for me and Jean.
Jean Williams was a lovely, gentle lady, but let us not kind of mistake her quiet demeanour and gentleness for meekness. She was very strong when she needed to be, and would be very forthright. Often a favourite memory of mine of hers was actually Zach saying, what's that? And her translating in Jack's ear everything that was going on in a PF meeting.
Jean introduced me to Earth Day, and up until that point I didn't know much about Earth Day. And she said, "Oh, we're doing this environmental thing," and of course, as usual, you know, going to all the events, and it was Queen's Wood. So the first Earth Day event that I actually went to, which Jean was facilitating, was in Queen's Wood. And several years later, I sort of carried on and, you know, started doing Earth Day events and things like that. So I always remember that Jean introduced me to Earth Day, which, you know, I didn't know about anything like that. So now I'm quite, you know, very into Earth Day and eco stuff and environmentalism, and, you know, running my own sort of eco sort of not-for-profit company and things like that. But it all goes back to Jean, who introduced me to Earth Day. But again, like many people have said, she's always been there, and if it weren't for Jean, I probably wouldn't have been able to do all the Pagan Federation Open Rituals event manager that I was doing for about 7 years. And she's been my mentor in that sense, and she's literally been supportive. When I've been too agitated with issues or whatever it is, you know, she's at the end of the phone, she's always calming me down, and she's like, and I said, "But we have to do this, otherwise," whatever. She said, "Look, the Pagan Federation is bigger than any one of us," and she's one of the people who actually gave me that idea that it's bigger than all of us. We just do our little bit, and it moves on. And so that's one of the kind of, she tempered me basically, you know, because I was all over the place like that. And she sort of calmed me down and made me work hard, I suppose. That's what she did, yeah.
And many people would associate Jean with Wicca, but this was not really the only tradition or method that she was interested in, is it?
No, and the Lamech and Crowley aspect might be a surprise to some who weren't aware of that. But I also knew of her via my husband, who had not realised until he got to know Jean that with her maiden name she had written the handbook manual for his department at work, and that many of the older people in the office knew her from when her company had done this for them, and they took it out of the drawer and showed him and said, oh yes, you know, we remember Jean, we still use the handbook today because it hasn't been bettered.
That's amazing.
So I think a lot of the pagan community don't know about Jean outside of it, but she was very successful in her marketing business and research.
I mean, she's been an inspiration and a figurehead to so many people in the pagan community. But I always felt that she kind of expanded beyond just the traditions or the hierarchy that might be associated with Wicca and the traditional way of doing things within that system. Would you agree with that?
Well, I can't speak about that because I don't work within the Wiccan system, although many of my friends are Wiccans, so I can't talk about that. But what I will say is that she had many interests. She had a very positive interest in psychology and in nature and in conservation of the earth. You know, she was a quiet person. She went about doing her good stuff without a lot of razzmatazz, and I think that's something a lot of people could learn from her.
Yeah, no need for look at me, look at me, look at what I'm doing, just quietly getting on with it. Because it's really transpiring that I knew she'd been a major contribution to the pagan community, but I'm surprised to know now exactly how wide that influence was, how widespread, what an innovator she actually was.
And I should imagine that there's many other things that she was doing. For instance, the Rainbow Bridge group, which conducted the most fabulous rituals, which the group all wrote. Each member would write a different ceremony. And we were very honoured through my husband's company Starfire to publish the book The Play Goes On by Jean Williams and Zachary Cox last year, with the most fantastic visual contribution from Ruth Beyer, Jean's longtime friend, and who's carrying on Jean's work. The play goes on, the rituals of the Rainbow Bridge. Now, these rituals, many of them, were based on the ancient Greek and the ancient Egyptian traditions, for example.
That's amazing. So ultimately, if you were able to say something to Jean now, if you were able to give her a message, what would it be?
I think it would be, here in this place where you did so many of your Earth Days and other ceremonies, that your work is going on through Ruth and all the other company that you were associated with, and that it will carry on rippling out in a good way into the world.
That's amazing. And I would like to say thank you very much, Jean, for showing me this place. I stood here, it happened twice in my life, and both times I ended up living there. I stood here on Earth Healing Day and I looked at these, you'd asked us all to go out and touch a tree and commune with a tree, and as I did so, I looked at these woods all around me and I just heard in my heart, I want to live really near here. And actually I do. I live about 50 yards away. And it's been fantastic, and it was a life-changing moment all those years ago. It's about 15 years ago now.
Here in this very spot.
Yeah, in this very spot. And obviously this place has also become very well known locally as the Witches' Coven, because it's the place where the pagans will come and hold their ceremonies. But it's a place where we would come and do many ceremonies down here, many open rituals, private rituals, and just really reconnect every time. And I'd say it's thanks to Jean for really activating this area because she got us coming down here every year looking after it.
Yes, because it's important to remember that it wasn't just about doing a ceremony, and they were always very gentle ceremonies that anyone at any level could come in at. But the important thing was, before you got to do the ceremony and have the food and drink, you had to go around with a bag and collect all the litter and look after the place. Sweeping the temple.
Sweeping the temple, indeed. So we'd like to say thank you very much, Jean. We love you, we continue to love you, and we miss you. But we know that wherever you are, you're continuing to do the good work, and your inspiration is very much alive and remembered. And we will, each one of us, carry on some of the inspiration and learning in our own way. And
thank you to Zach, you and Zach, for everything you've done.
Oh, I just would be basically that thank her, or I'm blessed, incredibly blessed to have had such an incredible time with her, living with, in such an incredible environment, and being such incredible friends and sharing the magical world as much as the mundane world. And absolutely, I'm just very, very blessed and very, very grateful. And besides that, I think, that her work will go on.
Well, my first message to Jean would be to thank her from the bottom of my heart for everything she's done for me, but also to assure her that her work will continue, not just from me, but from so many people who I know who've been so profoundly influenced by her.
Thank you very much. We're doing our best that we possibly can to look after Zach. I know you loved him dearly, and he loves you dearly and still loves you. My last memory of you alive is you walking down the road outside Treadwell's after your book launch, holding hands with Zach on your way to the car, and what a wonderful memory. Just reminding me of all the love that I always knew from you.
Jean, I'm carrying on the work, and thank you very much for introducing me to Earth Day, and that's become a big, big part of my life now. So, and as I said, in the sort of special birthday celebration that we were all there, I consider you as one of the 3 major high priestesses in my life. So thank you very much, and bright blessings.
Thank you for your kind support, for your lovely energy, for your lovely honest energy.
You did a great job, Jean. I'm still here, you're an inspiration to me. I'm sure we're going to be meeting, but not too soon, I hope.
Jean, thank you so much for all of the teaching that you did for the pagan community in London and across the country. And thank you for all that you gave us, particularly your humanity and your skill at bringing people together.
She's a role model. If people knew Jean, they had a brilliant role model to aspire to. The humility of the woman, the hard work of the woman. I'll just sort of say to Jean, thank you, Jean. You did well for a community that's been growing these last 30 years.
We all miss you very, very, very much, but I hope that you'll continue to inspire us, and I'm sure you will, and we certainly will not forget you. I know we always say the words will still come through even if you happen to be on a different plane, but thank you very, very much for everything, and welcome to our Samhain circle, and hope to talk to you soon.